If you look up the most evil family in America, you will find the Sacklers at the top of the list. From the peak of their philanthropy to the rock bottom of their scandals lies a tale of greed, deception, addiction, and destruction. In this video, we will dive into the history of this family, the drugs they developed, the extreme measures they took to make money, and how they enabled what we know today as the opioid crisis in America. In 1952, the three Brooklyn-born brothers, Arthur, Mortimer, and Raymond Sackler, bought a company by the name of Purdue Frederick. When the Sacklers acquired this company, they didn't start from scratch. Purdue Frederick was founded in 1892 by two doctors, John Purdue Gray and George Frederick Bingham. The three brothers were not just any businessmen. They had relevant experience in the medical field as psychiatrists and used that experience to their advantage. In the 1960s, Purdue sold mainly Librium and Valium. Librium was used for anxiety and Valium for tension. Arthur Sackler made sure these drugs sold successfully using aggressive marketing campaigns, and the drug ended up being successful. In fact, so successful that by 1961, doctors were giving on average over 1 million prescriptions per month for Librium alone. As for Valium, it was not released until 1963. This is because the company was facing a major issue. Valium and Librium are nothing but minor drugs that had the same exact effect, with the only difference being the name. If Purdue were to release Valium and market it similar to Librium, they would risk eliminating their own drug from the market. So what do you do as an evil company to combat this? Marketing worked like a charm. Purdue convinced the general public that Valium was used for muscle tensions, while Librium was mainly used for anxiety, thus eliminating the risk of eating their own business. Soon after it was released, Valium went from being prescribed for tension to being recommended by every doctor for almost any ailment you can imagine. And by the 1970s, Valium became the first drug to ever reach $100 million in sales. But concerns were growing as the FDA suspected the drugs could potentially be addicting. Many patients experienced withdrawal symptoms when they got off of Valium after using it for an extended period of time. The producer of these drugs, LaRoche, hired a professor to prove that Librium was harmless. But ironically, the results from the study proved that patients that were given high doses of the medication were showing withdrawal symptoms after quitting. When LaRoche was backed into a corner, they switched their tactics. This time, they did not deny that Librium would be addicting, and instead, they blamed the patients. Despite all of this, Purdue continued marketing and selling Valium, and by 1978, the drug reached its peak popularity with 2.3 billion pills sold that year alone. Meanwhile in the UK, Mortimer Sackler was working on something big. Up until 1980, people knew about morphine and its capability as a pain relief drug, but people were also aware of the side effects of it. This is because morphine was absorbed quickly in the bloodstream, which made it very easy to depend on and gave it this addictive property. Purdue understood how powerful morphine was, but they also were very aware of its negative stigma surrounding it. However, a company named Knapp Pharmaceuticals collaborated with Purdue to come up with an extended release version of morphine. This version of morphine was named MS Contin. MS was short for morphine sulfate, while the Contin was short for continuous release. In the meantime, Arthur was drifting apart from his brothers and his wife. Although he had acquired more money than he had ever imagined, he kept traveling around the world, trying on different business ventures, collecting art and doing philanthropic work in the 70s and mid-80s. By 1986, Arthur had made it to the Forbes 400 list and was now worth more than $150 million, which is equivalent to almost $500 million today. But a year later, Arthur had a heart problem. Despite this, Arthur wanted to protect his privacy, so no one knew he was at the hospital. By the time his family heard about his condition, they rushed to the hospital only to find out that Arthur had passed away. 1987 was a bittersweet year for the Sacklers. On one hand, they gained FDA approval for MS Contin, and on the other, they lost a dear family member. But the worst was yet to come for the Sacklers. After Arthur's passing, Purdue continued pushing marketing campaigns for their drugs. However, this time they pushed for something far more dangerous, something that would later on be instrumental to the company's downfall. In the 1990s, Raymond Sackler's son, Richard, along with other members of the family, created a new company called Purdue Pharma. Richard faced a major challenge. The patents for MS Contin were due to expire. In the world of big pharma, you have a set window of time where you have an exclusive patent on a drug, and with that patent, you can set any price you want, since you have no competition. However, these things don't last forever, and the patent for MS Contin was due to expire. This meant that Purdue competitors could easily create a generic version of the drug. In addition to this, MS Contin was marketed towards cancer patients, so it had a limited use case. After all, there were only so many cancer patients to go around, and eventually, this would kill MS Contin sales. Purdue needed to come up with something revolutionary that had a similar trait to MS Contin. The idea of extended release could perhaps be applied to drugs other than morphine. This suggestion was brought up by Dr. Robert F. Keiko, who was a medical researcher at Purdue. Dr. Keiko was put in charge to develop the medication that would replace MS Contin. This new drug, which they named OxyContin, was designed to release its active ingredient gradually over a 12-hour period. OxyContin contained oxycodone, an opiate twice as strong as morphine. Purdue was confident in its potential to be a superior alternative to existing pain medications. However, the Sacklers still had one more challenge to overcome: the FDA. The regulatory agency not only was more strict in the 90s, but was also aware of Purdue's history with MS Contin and how it was rushed into the market. Ultimately, the approval for OxyContin rested in the hands of a man named Curtis Wright. Purdue had to convince Curtis that OxyContin was safe and effective. The Sacklers argued that the patented, controlled-release formula would eliminate the risk of addiction, taking a different approach than traditional drugs. This assurance, much like the one La Roche gave to the FDA when Librium was released, was not based on any evidence. Once again, the Sacklers downplayed the dangers of their drugs until they got the approval they were seeking. By 1995, OxyContin was approved, and Purdue recruited over 300 sales reps who were trained and armed with medical literature highlighting the revolutionary properties of the drug. They had one mission and one mission only: sell OxyContin above all else. They would even persuade doctors who were already prescribing other painkillers, including Purdue's own drug, to switch to OxyContin. The Sacklers were fully committed to the new product and were willing to phase out the old one. The sales reps emphasized that OxyContin could be used for non-cancer related pain like back pain and arthritis, and by 1996, the drug was a massive success. As the prescriptions went up, so did the number of people who died overdosing on the medication. By the year 2000, deaths from opioid overdoses were rising sharply, while cities across America were dealing with the consequences. The situation got worse before it drew attention from health officials, law enforcement, and eventually, the media. In May 2007, three executives, CEO Michael Friedman, lawyer Howard R. Uttle, and former Chief Medical Officer Paul D. Goldenheim, in addition to Purdue Frederick, pleaded guilty to misinforming doctors and the general public about the dangers of OxyContin. To make matters worse, for the first 6 years of OxyContin's release, the Sacklers funded 20,000 educational seminars and programs as a part of a marketing campaign to convince doctors to keep using OxyContin for daily non-cancer related issues. By 2018, Purdue Pharma was in a dire situation as it had stacked a mountain of lawsuits against it. The lawsuits came from different individuals, over 35 states, and even US territories like Puerto Rico. Although the Sacklers were adamant on defending themselves, Purdue Pharma ended up filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy to drop the lawsuits. Further court appeals and negotiations are still going on as of now in 2024. But it wasn't the only company that was facing heat. In 2020, the US Department of Justice had filed a lawsuit against Walmart, claiming that its pharmacies were not vetting medications before selling it to patients, which made the opioid crisis even worse. As of today, there are more than 600,000 deaths from drug overdose. Many believe that OxyContin was the spark that started the fire that was the opioid crisis. The Sacklers used every opportunity they could to destroy people's lives, as long as it made them profits. And despite all of their crimes, they are still worth billions of dollars to this day.